everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today we're looking at Jessica Abel's La Perdida. This is an older book out from Pantheon. It looks like this was published originally through Fantagraphics in 5 volumes from 2001 to 2005, and then this collection is 2006. So this is an older book. It's something that I picked up at Second and Charles. I saw the nice hardcover. When I'm looking at shelves of books, comics especially, I'm always going to grab a hardcover. And then when I saw it was by Jessica Abel, whose work I'm familiar with, I was like, okay, that's got to be a good book. So I grabbed it, and I'm glad I did. The title La Perdida, I looked on Google Translate, and that means lost, and that's a thematically relevant title in many different ways throughout the book. But especially, I think the theme here is kind of a loss of naivete. I don't want to say innocence, but like naive optimism about the world, I think, is the biggest loss. But also dealing with like a struggle to find identity, maybe an identity that was never there. So the title is good. It resonates on a lot of different spectrums throughout the book. The drawing style is a really nice, loose, cartoony, really like juicy, inky brush at work with some nice dry brush all over for texture. And it's just, I call it like, I'm going to blank on it. I've used the term before, now I'm going to blank on it, but it's like just really efficient cartooning. Like you get everything you need to get, and it's not flashy. It's really efficient cartooning, and I like that as well. It keeps the story moving along. The structure of the story is really interesting. I don't want to give away too much, even though it's an older book. But the story is structured in a way that reminded me kind of the Lars von Trier movie with Bjork in it, Dancer in the Dark, where it feels like kind of just not much is happening for the first half. And then there's like this breaking point where something really intense happens, much different from the Dancer in the Dark story, but something really intense happens, and then the story picks up from there. So my relationship to the book in the first half was like, I was really enjoying just like the quiet, just following humans being humans that was happening in the first part of the book. But I was also, depending on which day and which mood I was in, I would get a little bored with it, or I'd be really engaged with it. It took me a while to finish the book. It's just pretty text heavy. Even though it's not a memoir, there's like the main character Carla is writing a lot, so it has a memoir feel. And then to get all that plus the dialogue was just a lot of reading, so it's like a slower book, which is good. You're getting your money's worth. But also I was just getting a lot of new books in while I was reading this one, and I try and cover new books really quickly just to get it up. So if people are wondering what a new book coming out is like, that they have something to refer to. So this one just kept, like, every chapter would get put to the side, and I'd go read a couple other books. So some days I was really checked in, and some days I was checked out. And today I had some time to finish the book, and the second half of the book gets really engaging, and I was really able to like breeze my way through that. So the first half is just like, it's all just straight drama all the way through, but it's not even drama. There's not much going on. It's just following character, and it does have that memoir feeling, even though it's obviously not. The main character, Carla, is someone who has, her father has a Mexican background, and so she's been raised in America as like a Mexican American, and she wants to know about her cultural heritage, and so she takes a trip to Mexico. And when she first gets there, she meets up with a guy that she had known in Chicago named Harry, who's also an American expat, and they're just hanging out and getting to know the city. But she starts to feel like he's not really connected. He's only hanging out with other Americans, and he wants to be like a famous writer, and he's kind of just chasing William Burroughs, like staying in Mexico and being disconnected. And she wants to get to know the culture in the city, so she starts going out and making a friend group of people from the city that they're staying in, and eventually breaks up with Harry, like gets rid of her relationship with him, and starts hanging out with this other group of people, including this character Memo here, who's like a revolutionary socialist character, and then this guy Oscar, who she has some kind of, they're not dating, but they have some kind of sexual romantic relationship, and they're roommates and things like that. And it just kind of follows this group of friends, and you really get to know them. You get to know their personalities. You sit in on their conversations, and it really just have like a travel memoir vibe to it, which is, at times it was engaging, and other times, like I said, depending on what else I'd been reading or the mood I was in or how I checked in and out, like I was like into the book and not into the book at different times in the first section. I really do like this down to earth, like no trickery, no genre type of books. But they're always a little bit dangerous because it's just like how much can you get involved in the characters. And I think it was hard for me to identify with any of the characters in the book, and it was interesting to get to see them all, and it's all very well written, but just different parts grabbed me and other parts didn't. And there is a lot of interesting stuff here where Carla and the people around her are struggling with this idea of her trying to find some kind of authentic Mexico, whether that's something good or bad or even possible for someone who's grown up in the United States. Like, what is her actual culture? Like, what is her actual investment in Mexico? Just because, like by blood, she kind of has some connection to Mexico. Like, why would that make her involved in the culture? Is she just going down there trying to live some kind of guilt fantasy? There's a lot of complexity there. And so that plays into the Lost title. And that seemed to me like what the whole book was going to be about, is just her kind of struggle with those issues and the people around her, and just a well-developed world of a few characters, which is difficult to do when you're writing fiction. Like, I don't understand how people write all these characters they've never met. I mean, I'm sure there are people that have informed these, but it's cool. I enjoy that. It's something I envy in writing. At one point, her brother comes down to visit. Her brother, I believe, Roberto, who is like more Mexican than she is, even though he's from America. He speaks Spanish better, and he's making some money as a skater. He's like started a website in the, again, this was being made in 2001 through 2005, so he's kind of cashing in. Her brother here, Rob, is cashing in on a website he's made that's like a social media website that connects skaters, and so he's kind of got a lot of money, and he comes down, and because of his website, like, he's more connected already in Mexico than she has been after being there for almost a year. She skips her flight back and stays illegally without a travel visa to be staying there. She's just living with this kind of unsavory group of characters. And her brother comes in, and that's where you start to see how unsavory the group of characters she's with actually is, and kind of how poor her decision making has been, how poor her decisions of who she hangs out with has been, and how isolated she's kept herself. Like, her brother comes in and immediately is like, let's go try this restaurant, let's go do this thing, let's go to the party. And she's like, man, I didn't even know this restaurant was right around the corner. I didn't. And she starts to realize she's got herself kind of like, even though she's moved, she's still the same person, whereas her brother is also still the same person. He's the social guy, he knows what's going on. Takes her to a party, and she gets to see the city from above for the first time. And this is about halfway through the book, and this is where you start to realize that there's something else coming up, something else going on in the book that really brings Carla into a bad place, and it exposes how unsavory the characters she's been hanging out with are. How her brother was right about his assessment of these people, and that she should be coming home, and just getting kind of like stuck. She's trapped herself. She's gotten lost in her mission. So I'll skip over that whole chunk of the book, because I think that's just go experience and go read it for yourself. It's really compelling. I blew through that right away. But at the end of the story, when I was reading it, I think one of the things that kind of kept me from fully engaging is I did feel like Carla's not a particularly sympathetic character, at least to me. It just seems like someone making a lot of bad, foolish, childish decisions. And you just kind of know it's going to go wrong. And that's never been me. Like, I've never been someone who needs to learn by having something go wrong. I'm always suspecting things are going to go wrong, and so I try and behave. So it's hard for me to feel sympathy for someone whose life goes bad because of just poor decision making and foolishness. And at the end, she, in her writing to herself, admits that to herself, and I think that was the most compelling part of the book to me is that that's what the story was about all along, and that it wasn't just like, oh, here's this fun character who got involved in this thing because like the world is shitty. It was like, hey, the world is shitty, and try to be wiser than that. Um, so she says, what that means is I was not alone. My isolation was by choice. There were still people who cared and still people who played by the rules. I could have chosen another way to be. The thing is, I thought the rules were different in Mexico, but they're not different. I didn't judge because I thought I wasn't qualified to judge. But as it turned out, that was just an excuse not to be engaged and not to act right. And it was the childish outlook of like, hey, it's all a game. I don't want to play by the rules of the game. And like her socialist friends, and this kind of anarchistic sense of let me go to another country where the rules don't abide and things are more wild and I can go be free from the system. And like shit went worse. And so the adult realization of, look, like there's rules everywhere. And there's always a hierarchy. There's always people in power. There's always, like people going to be getting taken advantage of. And there can be a childish rebelliousness against that, or there can be an adult, not acceptance and compliance, but like learning to work within the system and learning to do your best within that. And I think that's in the end what the La Perdida, the loss is that loss of the naivete, that kind of rebellious naivete of youth, for a more adult view of the world. And the adult view is painful. Like, I mean, I've been going through that. I lived until I was like 38, only ever working part-time and renting rooms. And I knew the whole time, though, that I was like, society was kind of, circumstance was allowing me to be a child. And I was getting sick of being a child, and I wanted to be an adult. And I've had to be an adult for the last couple of years, and it sucks. But also, like, it's a lot better in a lot of ways. It's not fooling myself, and a lot of great things have happened because of it, because I've started really pushing myself and taking responsibility. So this book has that as its core message. I think that's what Jessica Abel meant, and it's really portrayed well. That kind of aimlessness of the beginning is the aimlessness of youth, and I think maybe that's why I had a little hard time identifying it. And the character says at the end, she said, it seems so clear to me now, like a map, many clearly marked roads. And I looked at her, the girl I was, her head full of plans and hopes for what might lie in her future. And I watch her take one step, two steps, and then she takes a turn down one obscure and unmarked path. I struggle to keep track of her as she fades from view. Before I know it, she's gone from sight, from understanding. She's lost. I wish I could find her again, that girl. And there is a sense of that. Like, I often tell Tori, I'm like, man, like 19-year-old me would think like 40-year-old me is a douchebag piece of shit sellout. But I just look at, from 40, I look back at 19-year-old me, and it's just like, you just don't know. But I do miss a lot of what comes with that youthful optimism and just not knowing the boundaries of the world yet. Like having a boundaryless world, or having a boundaryless conception of the world, it's more vibrant and alive. And I don't know. I think maybe there's people out there who get lucky and maintain both. They manage to be an adult while maintaining that. I'm not sure, but I found, the end of the book was very touching, especially on those regards. So if you haven't, I'm assuming a lot of people have already read this since it's so old, but if you haven't and you can find a copy of this, it's a dense, thoughtful book, and I would definitely highly recommend it. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, the best way that you can support us is to support the books that Sean has put out through Living the Line, and the books that Sean has coming forward from Living the Line. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some of those now. Eric Creek's The Exile, which has been described by the artist as his Viking Western. It's a really intense story of revenge, rendered with this beautiful pen and ink style, and then these couple of spot colors that were also done in layers on ink and then converted into color. So that's just a really, really beautiful book. and a really intense story. There's also Yokoyama Yuichi's Plaza, which is a totally intense manga by an artist who has somehow figured out how to distill manga down to its purest essence. This book was successfully funded on Kickstarter, but if you missed the Kickstarter, you can order it through any comic store, any bookstore, Amazon, any place that you would normally get your graphic novels from. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.